What's up? Your boy Domuto. We back with another video. Today we're watching Carthu's Dojo, the truth about Dragon Ball Daima. I'm gonna tell you how I felt about Dragon Ball Daima at the end of the video. Let me tell you a little bit. I like it. I liked it. Was it great? No. Was it like just top tier? The animation was fire. The fights was good. But overall, I didn't really get into it, you know what I'm saying? It was just whatever to me. It felt, it felt fillery to me at some points. But anyway, let's get into it. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and let's go.
With Dragon Ball Daima, the final anime project featuring heavy Toriyama involvement, finished, a lot of people are just confused, including me. You see, I thought from the moment Daima was announced and Toriyama's extreme involvement was made clear that this was a canon Dragon Ball story. I even said so on multiple occasions, and to be clear, when I say canon, I mean connected to the events of Dragon Ball Super, which is, as of now, considered the main continuity for Dragon Ball. The issue is, there are a lot of inconsistencies in this series, and I think it's important we go over each and every one of them so I can explain why they matter and what I think the actual truth is. The first notable inconsistency is Shin and Kibito being split. Not only does this split predate when they are shown to be split in Dragon Ball Super by several years, but its explanation is a reversal of a retcon in Dragon Ball Super. You see, in the Buu saga, Goku theorizes that being absorbed by Majin Buu somehow canceled the Potara fusion, even further being more curious about the subject when he remembers that Goten and Trunks remained fused after being absorbed. However, it's in Dragon Ball Super that we find out Potara fusion is a limited form of fusion after all, but the time limit simply applies to non-Supreme Kai exclusively. In the Dragon Ball Super manga, Shin even flat out says that Buu's body wasn't the cause. So when Dragon Ball Daima aired and it was explained that Buu's body was used to defuse Shin and Kibito, this retcon was reversed back. But that caused a separate issue of Supreme Kai and Kibito being separated before Battle of Gods and defused by Buu instead of the Namekian Dragon Balls. It also means that Shin just forgot how he defused in the Future Trunks arc when saying that Buu's body doesn't work. However, I can understand this being a one-off, relatively small oversight since they wanted Shin to be involved in the cast, but unfortunately, it's just the beginning of a pattern. The next minor issue is Shin's statement of Goku being the strongest fighter in the universe. I don't have an issue of this because of Gohan, by the way. It's been nearly a year since Buu was defeated, so Gohan may have slacked off while Goku continued to train, something we know he was doing intensely because he says so at the end of Daima. The actual issue here is Beerus. While the Dragon Ball Super anime seems to make it ambiguous if Shin really knows anything about Beerus before Battle of Gods the movie made it clear he did. That movie also had more direct Toriyama involvement than Super's anime. On the other hand, the DBS manga rushes through Beerus's introduction, but King Kai knows that Beerus is the strongest in the universe and that Goku doesn't stand a chance, so I'd assume Shin knows as well, especially since during the Tournament of Power, Shin and Beerus argue who's at fault for the low mortal level of Universe 7, showing that they have history before the events of Battle of Gods. This is a relatively minor nitpick, but when you have an established hierarchy, making sure characters who know about it actually talk like they do is pretty important, even if Shin had just vaguely alluded to it by calling Goku something like the strongest mortal instead of the strongest overall. In the reverse of that, Universe 7 and the multiverse are mentioned in front of Goku and the main cast when they shouldn't know about this stuff yet. Beerus telling Goku about the multiverse in Dragon Ball was one of the bombshell reveals at the end of Battle of Gods. You could say that Goku just forgot, but what about the other characters? People have tried to use Goku's reaction to the multiverse reveal in the rushed Dragon Ball Super manga version as a way around this, but it's a really hard thing to make fit between Daima and Super, especially with the surrounding context of these inconsistencies. Speaking of the multiverse, I think the explanation of Rymus, while interesting, causes some issues. Supreme Kai seems to think Rymus is the supreme being in the multiverse, despite that title clearly belonging to Zeno in Dragon Ball Super, or even arguably the Grand Priest in terms of power in the Dragon Ball Super manga. I do appreciate that in Shin's breakdown of this information, characters like Beerus, Whis, and even Zeno aren't mentioned since the cast shouldn't know about them yet if Daima is connected to Super, but it is weird to be explaining the way the universe and multiverse is structured while ignoring them entirely rather than something alluding to them for the audience, like, there are other gods I hope you never have to meet. I would like to quickly say that while the visuals are a bit mistimed with what Shin is saying when describing the structure of the multiverse, source and the origin of the various Supreme Kai, he is not saying he was the first Supreme Kai assigned to Universe 7. He specifically says he was assigned way later during Dabura's father, Abura's reign, which is many generations of Supreme Demon King after the good Supreme Demon King sent Rymus to create the multiverse in the first place. We'll actually get back to this scene a little later in the video. Next, we have a big one though, Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta, and let's just bundle in Super Saiyan 4 Goku while we're at it, because both of them are really bad for this series being able to connect to Dragon Ball Super in basically the same way. For Goku, he's constantly saying things like Super Saiyan 3 is his final form when he first fought Beerus, or against Toppo in the Dragon Ball Super manga, he calls Super Saiyan God the 4th transformation, though this does forego things like Ozaru and the Super Saiyan grades 2 and 3. Remember, Super Saiyan 2 was originally just Super Saiyan grade 5 before Goku named them something different in the Buu saga. Anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that the transformation numbering system has always been however Goku feels at that moment. It's not some concrete, accurate science or anything, but it's clear he couldn't go further than Super Saiyan 3 in his fight against Beerus, because if he could've, he would've. Vegeta has it potentially even worse than Goku though, as he's fighting Beerus while enraged for the safety of the Earth and in the defense of his wife. Many fans have tried to say that Vegeta realized Super Saiyan 3's flaws and swore to never use it again, but that's pure headcanon. There's also future Trunks using a powered-up version of Super Saiyan 2 in the Dragon Ball Super manga, so people think Vegeta perhaps had the same thing when he fought Beerus, but there's no evidence for that, and his reaction to Trunks doing it implies that he's never seen anything like it before. Overall, in an instance where Goku would use Super Saiyan 3, I think Vegeta would as well, considering how we've seen their approaches to growing stronger play out and differ in the past or even future. Look at Vegeta strictly powering up Super Saiyan Blue in the Tournament of Power, while Goku goes on to ascend into a godly technique-based transformation. If anyone is going for a purely power-focused route, it's usually Vegeta, especially at this point in the story. Speaking of power, the evil third eye is considered so powerful that Goma would rather have it than weaken people who defeated Buu, heavily implying that its power alone surpasses Buu. So once Goma obtains the eye and uses it to increase his own power continually as the final fight of Daima progresses, he should be the strongest villain everyone has faced, so why in Dragon Ball Super is Buu called the strongest enemy up to that point? Well, thankfully there's a few explanations to this one. The first being, Buu in this case isn't just referring to Kid Buu, so if you think Buuhan is stronger than Kid Buu, it's easy enough to think Goma ends up somewhere between the two. There's also the fact that the statements about Buu being the strongest enemy are made in the beginning of Super, which is when Goku gets the money from Mr. Satan and before the several-year time skip to Battle of Gods, so it could take place before Daima as well. Even if these explanations weren't a thing, it's still a pretty big nitpick, because we all know the real-world explanation for this. Daima didn't exist yet. Finally, I have another nitpick point, but it's important to think about. In Dragon Ball Super, we learn how the Dragon Balls came to be. Namekians found Zalama's Super Dragon Balls and mined them, learning to create their own smaller wish orbs and dragons as weaker imitations of the planet-sized originals. But Daima goes on to call the Demon Realm Dragon Balls the original Dragon Balls, and characters say that Neva is the most knowledgeable about the Dragon Balls, seemingly presenting him as the original creators of Dragon Balls as a concept. This seems to not work with Dragon Ball Super's lore for a few reasons. Sure, characters like Gloria wouldn't know about Zalama and the Super Dragon Balls, so he'd assume that the Demon Realms are the original, but finding out the Demon Realm and even the Namekian race predate the multiverse does put into question how the Super Dragon Balls of Universe 6 and 7 would be mined by Namekians in the past. It's vague enough you could say the multiverse was created first, then Zalama made the Super Dragon Balls, then the Namekians mined them while travel between the outside universes and the Demon Realm was allowed, and finally Neva learns to recreate them on his own, but that's a lot of speculation with no confirmation. It just seems like it wasn't even a consideration when they were making this lore, which is probably the most likely answer. So with all of the inconsistencies out of the way, I wanted to talk about some arguments I've seen floating around online where people say it must connect to Super, but none of these arguments make any sense at all. The first is Bardock being shown in Dragon Ball Daima Episode 1, and it's the Dragon Ball Super, aka Dragon Ball Minus version of the character, and the narrator even alludes to that explanation for how Goku got to Earth as an infant. All this means is that in the same way all of Dragon Ball's manga events are connected to Daima, Dragon Ball Minus is as well. That's all you can draw from this. The next argument is equally silly. The main universe being Universe 7. I can see the confusion, but as I said before, this is more of an issue than it is a good thing for the argument due to the timing of its reveal relative to when Battle of Gods would happen if it is connected. Considering from an out-of-universe perspective that Universe 7 is the established universe number for the main story, I don't see why they would change it regardless of the canon status of that story. The same goes for the next point, the Supreme Kai in the scene I said I'd go back to earlier. These are the Supreme Kai we know from Dragon Ball Super. That's undeniable, but I think that's simply because they are the Supreme Kai of the multiverse. Similarly to the universe number being the same, what would you prefer they do? Make up a bunch of new Supreme Kai? Very generally speaking, non-canon and even fan stories will use the established canon characters and locations and world building in their story to help ground it in the world that the viewer or reader is familiar with. Think of the old Dragon Ball Z movies, Dragon Ball GT, or if you're a One Piece fan, the One Piece movies. And actually, I'll get back to One Piece in a little bit. I've also seen people call all of Dragon Ball canon or one continuity, but say it's just different timelines, and that's just not how this works. The timelines in Dragon Ball are not separate continuities. There isn't a time ring that goes to Dragon Ball GT because that's not how time rings are made. Dragon Ball undeniably has multiple continuities, with one being the main continuity at any given moment. Right now, it seems like Dragon Ball Super's manga is still the main continuity, unless we're told something different. I am in the process of making a video about what's exactly canon and not canon, and what's in the various branching continuities of Dragon Ball, so subscribe if you want to see that soon. Finally, we have one of the most recent arguments, the Dragon Ball Super manga's latest volume at the time of this recording, Volume 24, where the table of contents show Mr. Popo taking off his turban to reveal he has 2 horns, something we first found out in Dragon Ball Daima. Now, I shouldn't have to say this, but if we're going to the table of contents in a manga volume to point out that a character likely designed by Toriyama for Daima is the same as that design, there's no hope. Toyotaro is a fan, just like all of us, and he's the mangaka for Dragon Ball Super. I think his choice about connecting Daima will be made very clear one way or another, and it won't be in the table of contents of a volume release. A more interesting point to do with the Dragon Ball Super manga is Namekians being established to come from another realm entirely, but I want to talk about that more in a little bit. The last important thing I have to talk about is the real-world IP struggle for Dragon Ball. It's not fun, and it actually just annoys me, so I'm gonna keep this brief, but it is important to what we're talking about today. Akio Yoku wanted the rights to Dragon Ball's anime and video game projects, while Shueisha was the one who actually owned those rights as far as we know, as well as the rights to the manga and basically everything else Dragon Ball. At some point, Yoku, with his own company, Capsule Corp, a real-world company, not the fictional one, got these rights in some capacity since they're credited on anime and video game projects, but seemingly he wants all the rights. It's just a mess. This power struggle leads me not to care when Yoku says a project he worked to create with Toei, in this case Dragon Ball Daima, is factually tied to the Majin Buu arc, because he knows that being canon matters, especially to Western fans who we know he often has in mind. Basically, until we find out who's actually helming Dragon Ball's story going forward, everything else is marketing. This situation just really sucks. It's why I don't talk about the external factors when it comes to Dragon Ball as a series. All the fun stuff is in-universe. A lot of the not-so-fun stuff and money-grubbing stuff is outside of it. Needless to say, I have no plans about talking about this anymore in the near future. But with all of that out of the way, you probably think I'm about to say Daima isn't canon or connected to the main continuity in any way. But you're not entirely right. Remember, everything I say from here is just my opinion and interpretation, so I could be wrong, and the continuity problems are really just going to be ignored. But I think Daima is really like a One Piece movie. You see, for several One Piece movies, Eiichiro Oda, the mangaka of the series, gives the anime staff canon tidbits that can be added in. It's never the entire plot of the movie, but it generally is a reveal about something in the broader world of One Piece, and I think Daima is the same. You see, Daima was originally a project that Toei was helming on their own, but as Toriyama gave some advice, he eventually got deeply involved in the project, to the point that he added in true lore tidbits about the world of Dragon Ball, like the Demon Realm origins of the Namekians, which is referenced in the Dragon Ball Super manga, years before Daima's release or even its announcement, but it was while Toriyama was working working on the series, clearly showing us that some of these ideas did cross over to Toyotaro and the manga. This is also why I originally was so adamant it was canon. Just think about it. The last time Toriyama overhauled a Toei exclusive Dragon Ball project, we got Battle of Gods, but this is clearly different. I think the lore tidbits are likely the canon part of Daima and will be used by Toyotaro in the future. I could even see Broly getting Super Saiyan 4, but I think the events of the show are just there to be enjoyable, for fun. Toei and Yoku have no real say over canon, so the series was made to be a bonus at first, something to hold us over with no involvement from Toriyama initially, but instead, we got something I think was pretty special, with Toriyama taking a shockingly prominent role in its creation and conception. And canon or not, I doubt that this is going to be the last time we see Toriyama's Demon Realm, lore, and world building from this series. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, and thank you so very much for watching.
Well, shout out to Carthu Dojo. This was fire. Yeah, he had a lot of insights on this one. Like I said, I kind of agree with him. But it's just a lot of plot holes in this Dragon Ball Daima, and it's just it's how it is. But I mean, it was a cool show. I ain't gonna say I didn't enjoy it, and I did. So anyway, shout out to Carthu Dojo. Make sure you check out the last Carthu Dojo video right here. Check out another video I might like right here, and I'll catch y'all next time, man. Peace.